What is going on, my Guardian Gamers? It's I, Birdman, back with another Destiny 2 video, and today I'm going to be doing a bit of a tier list here for all of the Titan subclasses in Destiny 2. Just because something might not be ranked at number 1 doesn't mean it's the worst, but I wanted to highlight all 5 of them and kind of show off which ones are going to be the best, have the most build options, has the best like end game content, and ones that, you know, need a little bit of extra love. Now, before I get into the video, know you can follow me over on YouTube and Twitter at Birdman778. Give a thumbs up on this video. Let me know down below in the comments whether you're interested in some Titan, Hunter, or Warlock content. Subscribe to the channel and become a member. Again, remember at the end of the videos, we're going to be adding all the members. So if you want to be one of those people, make sure you're signing on up. Now, let's jump right on into number 5. All right, in that number 5 spot, it's going to be Stasis, the Behemoth Titan. Now, I have to give a little bit of credit to Stasis. Unfortunately, it was kind of the guinea pig test subject for our current build system in Destiny 2. Essentially, all the other 3 first subclasses all got a bit of a 3.0 added onto them, as well as Strand essentially getting to learn from all of the previous 4 and being able to build upon it. So I think Stasis bit has a bit of an unfair ranking, but honestly, for what it is, it does fit that spot. And we are actually going to be getting a bit of a update to Stasis in season 23, so hopefully we're able to do another video of this and see this jump up the rankings a bit. But kind of going over the entire class itself, the super is not terrible whatsoever. Glacial Quake does some pretty big boss damage, especially when you're breaking all those stasis crystals, but breaking the stasis crystals is a huge part of that damage. So if you're not able to do it in a fast amount of time, it can be kind of meh. Also, the fact that it's kind of connected to your Shivering Strike charged melee definitely does not help it out at all, just because that might be one of the weakest parts of the entire subclass. Ability wise across the board, not really much else added onto the barricade unless you're using the Horror Frost, where it turns that barricade into a bunch of stasis crystals. Again, that Shivering Strike is really freaking awful. I absolutely hate it. There's no really good like target lock on it. If you click it and you miss your target, you could slide right by him, and it just really sucks all around. Grenade wise, I actually have no issue with any of these grenades. Actually, the Glacial grenade is really solid for Titan, just for the fact that we have an aspect in Cryoclasm where we're able to slide into those and make them explode. Speaking about those aspects, Tectonic Harvest, Howl of the Storm, that Cryoclasm, and Diamond Lance actually aren't all really that bad. But Diamond Lance is a bit of a niche, I would say, all around. Tectonic Harvest is absolute must. I think is actually one of the coolest aspects that we have in the game currently. Cryoclasm, again, kind of a niche thing. Sliding into stasis crystals makes them shatter and do a bunch of damage. And then also a really solid one in Howl of the Storm, where sliding creates that charged melee barricade in front of you that you're able to use and explode. When it comes to fragments, they're kind of good, but at the same time, a little meh back and forth. Again, I hope we see some new fragments coming in season 23, just because I think this subclass could use some love and would be filled out a lot more if it had a few more of those fragments that are able to build into it a little bit better, rather than just be like, you know, this gives you that energy, this gives you this energy, and that kind of stuff. If I had to give Stasis a ranking on the tier list system, I'd probably give it like a B+ right now. Again, it's able to get the job done for you, but at the same time, aspects of it are a little wonky at times and definitely not as powerful for end-game content. Next up, we're going to have this Striker Titan for the Arc subclass. First off, when it comes to the supers, Thunder Crash is a really solid all-around option just because it is a good start and stop super, but unfortunately, the damage on its base version is not all that great. Really does require that Cuirass of the Falling Star to juice it up a little bit more, and at the same time, I just really don't want to waste an exotic spot just for this one singular use. Fists of Havoc, on the other hand, isn't too terrible all around, but the slams from this roaming super at times can be a little bit slow and definitely not all that great in my opinion. Again, not a huge fan of roaming supers in this game. There's a few that are not too terrible with like Strand and such, but at the same time, this one just does not really cut it for me. Ability wise, it definitely has something cool with Thruster, being able to use that evasion and kind of, again, I keep mentioning like the start and stop effects. Makes it really solid for things like the Heart of Inmost Light, being able to bounce between all of your abilities. Melee wise, really solid all around. Seismic Strike is a really great one for PvP. Ballistic Slam kind of fell off in my opinion once we got into that Arc 3.0, just purely off the fact that it was a cool option, but an even better option is going to be that Thunderclap, where you're able to charge up your charged melee to do a giant Thunder Punch right in front of you. This was one that I was really excited to see once they added into Destiny 2, but unfortunately, I think they've just kind of put it on the back burner at times with nerfing and balancing different exotics that worked around it. Grenade wise, across the board, pretty solid. Pulse grenades are definitely, I think, my favorite grenade in the entire game. So definitely a big fan of these. Now, when it comes to the aspects, this is where I think the subclass might fall off a little bit, but it's pretty much just because there's only really two options to use for it. First off, one of those being the Touch of Thunder, giving all your different grenades different effects. Again, I mentioned that pulse grenade before. Giving it those ionic traces is really good just because you're able to get that extra energy from it. And then also knockout, critically wounding a target or breaking their shield, infuses your melee attack with arc energy, increases your melee range, and then also will make you amplified. So really good one all around, but unfortunately I mentioned that there's only two options pretty much because the final one, Juggernaut, really is only like a decent, I would think, PvP option, and it's barely even good for that, I would say. With full class ability energy, and after spring for a short time, you gain a frontal shield that blocks incoming damage. When your frontal shield breaks, your class ability energy is depleted, and while amplified, the shield blocks significantly more damage. Yeah, this is kind of meh to me all around, especially for someone who is a big PvE nut. And then finally with the fragments, again, kind of one of those things where I feel like they're just not all around that great. I end up using essentially the same few for every single build that I have. Being able to jolt targets gives me those ionic traces. My grenades do more duration, as well as my grenade jolting targets. And then that final slot, essentially just like a flex for whatever I'm feeling like at that time. Again, the aspects and the fragments, I feel like kind of hold this class back a little bit, but luckily the other abilities are pretty solid. If I had to give this a ranking on the scale, I'd probably give it a B+ as well, but a little bit higher up there, maybe to an A- if I really was feeling, you know, generous on that day. But at the same time, the next three that we're talking about are going to be my main focus whenever I am doing endgame content. And number 3, that's going to be our Sentinel class, the Void. Now, this one is near and dear to my heart, so it took a lot for me to put this at that middle spot, but the next two subclasses are just way too powerful for me to ignore. But I actually think this might be one of the best subclasses for pretty much any player in any style of activity. First off, with the supers, we have the Ward of Dawn, being able to pop that bubble, giving us those Weapon of Light, and also just giving us some really good defense. It has a really short cooldown, and it's probably my favorite super in the entire game. Also, we have the Sentinel Shield, so we're able to have that roaming super. Now, this is probably my favorite roaming super, just because of the fact that it also gives us that Sentinel Shield to do the defensive wall, so we're able to guard all of our teammates, and if they shoot through our barrier, they're going to get a huge damage boost. When it comes to abilities, we actually don't have any different barricades or anything, but we'll talk about why this is a bit juiced up in with our aspects. Especially for the melees, the throwing shield is super freaking awesome just because it constantly will give us that overshield and add some distance onto our gameplay. The shield bash is also a really solid one just because it's able to suppress targets and is really good if you use those Peregrine Greaves exotic legs. Grenade wise, I think this might be some of the best set of grenades in the entire game. Pretty much all of these are really good in some way, shape, or form. Void Wall, Suppression, Scatter Grenade, and especially Vortex Grenade. Now, when it comes to aspect, I think this is some of the best in the entire game. First off, with that offensive bulwark, whenever we have that overshield or we're in our Ward of Dawn, we're getting that grenade recharge, and we have increased melee range in our melee final blows, extend the duration of our overshield, while also giving us a second shield to throw with our roaming super. So that's really freaking awesome. Bastion, giving our barricade that overshield ability, constantly regenning us and keeping that overshield constantly flowing. Again, big reason why I like using this. And then finally, Controlled Demolitionist, hitting a target with a void ability or volatile explosion makes them volatile. Further damaging the volatile target causes them to explode, creating that giant explosive kind of chain reaction that also heals us at the same time. So really solid all around options here. And finally, with the fragments, just really good all around flow. I think the only thing that really holds this back more than anything is the fact that void breaches at times can be a little meh. It's hard to make those all the time versus something like ionic traces or stasis crystals. And also they don't have an ability to just like track towards you. Again, big reason why the shards and the ionic traces are probably the best like elemental, like well option out there. But at the same time, getting weakening effects, getting volatile, and getting suppression is really freaking awesome. If I had to give this a rank, it's probably going to go straight into A tier. It's always going to be a good option no matter what. Has a really good set of exotics that will work well with it, and all around is probably my favorite subclass. In that number 2 spot, it's going to be Sunbreaker. Now, this was kind of a hard one to go back and forth from, whether this was going to be number 1 or if it was going to be number 2. But let's talk about the supers first. Obviously, Hammer of Soul, really great for creating sunspots and just roaming around doing a bunch of damage. And then the Burning Maul, a little bit meh on its own, but when you combine it with the new exotic arms that were introduced in Season of the Witch, you're able to get essentially that Cuirass of the Falling Star effect, where it's going to do big damage on a single target. Ability wise, nothing different with Barricade, but we are able to get that throwing hammer. This is pretty much the reason why I think this class essentially gets in that number 2 spot, just because you're able to constantly run around, throw your hammer, get big damage, and also heal yourself in the process because you are cured every time you pick up that hammer. So it makes those really close engagements a lot of fun. But at the same time, Hammer Strike's a really great option if you're doing some big Scorch Ignite builds. Grenade wise, really solid across the board. Thermite Grenade's always a great option, Incendiary Grenade and Solar Grenade. But the Healing Grenade is the reason why I like this a lot, just purely out the fact I'm able to chuck it at my feet, get the restoration and cure, and be able to constantly keep on going. Aspect wise, really great across the board. First off, Soul Invictus, being able to create those sunspots that are going to heal us with some restoration, scorch targets, ignite them, and constantly just be a nuisance on the battlefield, as well as Roaring Flames to increase all those stacks up to 3 times and gives us a lot more damage. And then finally, Consecration, so that we're able to do that super awesome charged melee slam. Again, mixing this with that new Titan exotic arms is going to create a bunch of flaming fire tornadoes, which I think is really interesting. So this makes it just a really good option all around. And finally, with the fragment wise, again, just really great with being able to keep you alive constantly with restoration, radiant, and cure effects, as well as being able to increase our scorch and ignition across the board. This one, I would have to give it a pretty solid S ranking. Just again, it's going to be something that you're going to be able to use in endgame content to constantly stay alive. You're able to use this to essentially solo anything that you want to do in the game. I can't tell you how many solo dungeons I've done with this exact subclass. So again, really great, but at the same time, it does not immediately take the cake. And in that number 1 spot, we have the Berserker Titan. Now, obviously, this only has 1 super available, that Blade Fury, but it is an absolute freaking juicer. Being able to get Sever and Suspend effects on a roaming super that is pretty fast all around. It's definitely one that I genuinely do enjoy running around and smacking as many nerds as humanly possible. Nothing different with our first 2 abilities, but that Frenzy Blade, we get 3 activations of this. It's going to be able to sever targets and is really freaking good for melee focused builds. And then with our grenade, the Shackle Grenade, the Threadling Grenade, and the Grapple are all really good options, but Shackle more than anything is really good because this entire subclass is really great with suspension. Now, when it comes to the aspects, this is probably some of the best sets in the entire game. First off, Into the Fray, constantly be able to get that Woven Mail and melee regen is very important. Banner of War, getting that extra melee damage, the healing aspect of it, and the fact that it's able to just constantly stay up is absolutely insane. This aspect, more than anything, is the reason why this subclass is probably at number 1, because it makes essentially all endgame content in the game pretty invalid, because you're constantly able to just stay alive. Drenger's Lash, really great, being able to turn that barrier into a suspending ability, and also has a really great exotic based around it. And then finally, the Fletch Storm, being able to use that charge melee to jump up in the air and shoot a bunch of unraveling projectiles is just freaking awesome. Absolutely love this. Again, 4 amazing aspects, a big reason why Strand is number 1. And when it comes to the fragments and everything, again, just really great ability regen all around, getting Woven Mail, using Tangles, and you know, ones where just dealing damage gives you grenade energy is really great. Again, all around, this subclass is an S+++ through the moon. If you are trying to do day 1 raids or anything anymore, you are probably going to be using Berserker Titan because it is just an absolute juicer. So what's your ranking for all the Titan subclasses in Destiny 2? Let me know in the comments down below, and also let me know what your rankings are for the other 2 classes. But thank you so much for watching the video, guys. Let me know what you think down below. Make sure you're liking the video, subscribing, and becoming a member, and follow me over on YouTube and Twitter at Birdman778. Hope you guys have a great night, day, or whatever it may be.